Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. Today I want to show you my favourite kinds of processes on Cubase. This is using two plugins, the Envelope Shaper and the Multiband Envelope Shaper, to sculpt your drum sound. No EQ, no compression, anything like that, just the Envelope Shaper. So this was a session recorded live in a theatre, so plenty of spill. Let's have a listen to the drums just on their own. Fair bit of guitar spill in there, fair bit of vocals. Let's have a listen to the snare on its own. Doesn't sound too bad. We've got quite a lot of hi-hat in there. If I were to bring up the level of that so I could bring up the snare, I would get more hi-hat, more spill. But if I just want to bring up the attack, I can go into my Envelope Shaper. And I've got my attack knob here. Now by bringing that up, it's just going to let the initial transient through and it's going to punch that up. Let's have a listen to it without and then with. Now let's bring it in. Without. That's like using an expander or a gate and then using kind of a compressor all in one. And just by turning a few knobs on the Envelope Shaper, we can bring up that punch and get rid of all that spill. Let's have a look at it on the kick. So kick on its own. Doesn't sound bad. But we've got some spill in there. Let's bring in that Envelope Shaper. Far more punch on that bottom end. Without it, bit flabby. With it, and it's bringing some of that spill out of the mix as well. But let's have a look at this multiband expander, the Envelope Shaper, sorry, because this is where it gets really interesting. We can zone in on a specific frequency range and say that we want to expand just that area, or we want to flatten just that area, so we can bring up the release and get rid of all the attack. So I've tuned this to the click of the bass drum. Let's have a listen to that on its own. So just that clicky area. And let's bring that in. Let's bypass it. No EQ, no anything. We're just using the Envelope Shapers just to take the envelope of the sound, the attack and the release and manipulate it in the way we want to. Now, we could use the EQ for this. We could say, okay, let's take an EQ and let's pop on some high end. Okay, just nice and broad. Let's put some EQ in that same area as we did there. So was it 1K to 10K kind of area? Yeah, it's around there. So let's get rid of the Envelope Shaper and just put that EQ on and listen to the spill. We're also bringing up the cymbals, we're bringing up the spill, we're bringing up the snare, we're bringing up a whole range of stuff. But by getting rid of that EQ and using the Multiband Envelope Shaper, we're achieving the same thing, but we're not affecting any of the spill. This is such an important plugin in Cubase that I feel gets overlooked quite often. It's like a compressor, a gate, an expander, and an EQ all in one. And it's the most valuable tool, I feel, in the stock compressors within Cubase that you can use to sculpt your drum sounds. Let's have a listen to the overhead, see what we can do there. Let's have a listen to them on their own. Okay, fine. What I want to do is pop on the Multiband Envelope Shaper on both of them. And we're going to listen to how we can effectively get rid of that bottom end kind of mud that's in there. So let's listen to one on its own for the moment. Let's just pan it to the center. So. So as you can hear, we've got a fair amount of spill there. So what I'm going to do, listen to that bottom end. You can hear how there's quite a nice amount of kick in there, but then the bass guitar and the guitar is kind of bringing up that whoop, whoop, whoop kind of sound. So let's bring down the release on it, and let's bring down the length. So we just want that initial attack. So the length is relative to the attack. So let's bring up the attack, bring down the release. and put that all back in. Without it, with it. What we're doing is we're just tuning that bottom end and just making it so that we've just got the initial transients of that bottom end that we're getting from the overheads, but we've not got that spill in there. So let's do the same thing to the other overhead track. Let's pan that centre, just so we can hear it. Nice. Then let's go into the high mids and the top end. Let's see what we can do there. I think I want that to be the envelope. I kind of want to get less attack on that. I want it to have a bit more of a washy sound. So let's take the attack down. Let's bring the release up and the length up. So without it, now with it, it's like putting an EQ on, but we're doing it in a kind of a transient sense. So we're making the overheads a bit more washy, making it so you've got a bit less of the initial hit and a bit more of the overall tone. Because when you're doing live recordings here, a lot of the sound of the shells of the drums is going to come from the close mics. If you're in the studio, you can rely on room mics or the overheads a bit more, but spill is a real issue with this, this live stuff. So we're going to rely far more on the close mics for the initial attack, and then the overheads want to give us the overall bulk of the sound. But we don't want that low-end rumble kind of woofiness, we just want the initial hit there. So let's copy that over onto the hi-hat track as well. And let's have a listen to it. So, excuse me, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Let's pop it over here. So, both those overheads. Kind of a bit pumpy. When we bring in the kick and snare, we've got a far punchier drum sound. The kick and snare, we're just taking what we want. We're just taking that initial hit, the snare hit, the kick hit. We're just getting that initial transient. And then with the overheads, we're kind of getting rid of those hits and we're just having the overall wash. But we're doing that in a frequency dependent way. We don't want that on the bottom end or the low mids. We just want it on kind of the mid-range and the high mids. So that all together gives us far more control over our drum sound without having to use compressor, without having to use a gate, and without having to use an EQ. We're not going to be affecting the spill at the same time as the actual drum hit. We're just going to be doing it completely independently. I think that's a fantastic range of plugins, I suppose, envelope shaper and multiband envelope shaper. Really, really handy to use and really good to have as stock in Cubase. So if you're using that for a drum sound, jump into those, see what you can do. The multiband envelope shaper is a bit harder to get your head around, but if you solo areas, you can hear the bits that you want. You can hear, for example, the click of the bass drum, and you can just boost that without having to do anything to the spill. Dead handy. All right, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit like. Thanks a lot for checking it out. See what we've got coming up next. Take care.